Ezekiel chapter 16. Now this one is kind of lengthy, but we just gonna rock with it. Parable of God's adulterous wife. The word of the Lord came to me again. Son of man, confront Jerusalem with her detestable practices. So tell her everything that she has done that is wrong and evil and wicked. You are to say, this is what the Lord God says to Jerusalem. Your origin and your birth were in the land of the Canaanites. Your father was an Amorite and your mother a Hethite. As for your birth, your umbilical cord wasn't cut on the day you were born, and you weren't washed clean with water. You were not rubbed with salt or wrapped in clothes. So this is typically what happens with, I guess, a newborn during that time. No one cared enough about you to do even one of these things out of compassion for you, but you were thrown out into the open field because you were despised on the day you were born. I passed by you and saw you thrashing in your blood, and I said to you as you lay in your blood, live. So when they were lost and clueless, they eventually matured into a people, but, yeah. Also, when it says, as for your birth or your origin, so Abraham is the father of these nations, right? So he originated in Chaldea, which is the region of Babylon. And so he was taken out of Babylon, taken out of their customs. And we'll talk about that more later in Ezekiel, but that's just a little backstory on that. I made you thrive, I made you, like plants of the field. You grew up and matured and became very beautiful, or matured and developed the loveliest of ornaments. Your bosoms were formed and your hair grew, but you were stark naked. Then I passed by you and saw you, and you were indeed at the age for love. So I spread the edge of my garment over you and covered your nakedness. I pledged myself to you, entered into a covenant with you. This is a declaration of the Lord God, and you became mine. I washed you with water, rinsed off your blood, and anointed you with oil. I clothed you in embroidered cloth and provided you with fine leather sandals. I also wrapped you in fine linen and covered you with silk. I adorned you with jewelry, putting bracelets on your wrists and a necklace around your neck. I put a ring in your nose and earrings on your ears and a beautiful crown on your head. So you were adorned with gold and silver, and your clothing was made of fine linen, silk, and embroidered cloth. You ate fine flour, honey, and oil. You became extremely beautiful and attained royalty. Your fame spread among the nations because of your beauty, for it was perfect through my splendor which I had bestowed on you. This is a declaration of the Lord God. Now he did all of this for them, gave them all of this. And what did they do? Squandered it all. Come on. I mean, y'all had it made. Y'all were wealthy. He gave y'all the beautiful things. And what did y'all do? Squandered it, right? Yeah. Made y'all a beautiful nation, right? Amongst all nations. All the nations knew about you. Like, y'all were hot stuff. But then what did you do? But you trusted in your beauty and acted like a prostitute because of your fame. You lavished your explicit favors on everyone who passed by. Your beauty became his. You took some of your clothing and made colorful high places for yourself, altars, and you engaged in prostitution on them. These places should not have been built, and this should never have happened. You also took your beautiful jewelry and made from the gold and silver I had given you, and you made male images, idols, like the Assyrians did, and like the Egyptians and the Babylonians, so that you could engage in prostitution with them. Then you took your embroidered clothing to cover them and set my oil and incense before them. Worship. The food that I gave you, the fine flour, oil, and honey that I fed you, you set it before them as a pleasing aroma. Who was the pleasing aroma supposed to go to? Yeah, offerings were what they had been taught to do with offerings. They were now doing those things on these altars and for these false idols. That is what happened. This is the declaration of the Lord God. You even took your sons and daughters, you bore to me and sacrificed them to these images as food. Moloch, And if you go back in I think it's either in my Bible study for Jeremiah playlist or my actual Bible study playlist, I did a whole video on Moloch. Wasn't your prostitution enough? You slaughtered my children and gave them up when you passed them through the fire to the images. In all your detestable practices and acts of prostitution, you did not remember the days of your youth when you were stark naked and thrashing in your blood. They don't remember where they came from. They don't remember where they started. They seem to have quickly forgotten. Then after that, okay? Woe, that's a double woe, and it's never good to you. So the person on the other side of this woe, yeah, the declaration of the Lord God. You built yourself a mound and made yourself an elevated place in every square. You built your elevated place at the head of every street and turned your beauty into a detestable thing. You spread your legs to everyone who passed by and increased your prostitution. Now, this is not a literal thing. They just, anytime that they would, when it says everyone who passed by, they took up the customs and practices of all these other nations. That's what it means here. You engaged in promiscuous acts with Egyptian men, their statues, the idols that they built. Your well-endowed neighbors, so it would have been like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, all the nations around them, and increased your prostitution to anger me. Therefore, I stretched out my hand against you and reduced your provisions. So all the things that he had given them up here, he reduced them. I gave you over to the desire of those you hate, so those nations, the Philistine women who were embarrassed by your indecent conduct. Then you engaged in prostitution with the Assyrian men because you were not satisfied. Even though you did this with them, you were still not satisfied. So no matter where they went, it wasn't enough to satisfy their flesh. That's like with sin. When you sin, and you keep sinning, you're not satisfied. Your flesh is not satisfied, so you're going to continue to sin. But you were not satisfied with this. How your heart was inflamed with lust, the declaration of the Lord God, when you did all these things, the acts of a brazen prostitute, building your mound at the head of every street and making your elevated place in every square. But you were unlike a prostitute because you scorned payment. So they did it for free. You adulterous wife who receives strangers instead of her husband. Men give gifts to all prostitutes, but you gave gifts to all your lovers. That's very backwards. You bribed them to come to you from all around for your explicit favors. So you were the opposite of other women in your acts of prostitution. No one solicited you. When you paid a fee instead of one being paid to you, you were the opposite. So this was out of desperation, right? They were paying other nations to come to them because they wanted to worship their idols. They wanted to also practice their customs. So I'm going to stop here and I'll do a part 2.